Folks, welcome back to another episode. This episode is going to be about why victim mentality, emotional suppression and labels are quietly ruining men. Well, not quietly, they are ruining men. And how personal responsibility is so important. This is quite a sensitive topic, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on these things, but I'm not really here to be everyone's cup of tea, so just listen to what I have to say. This is coming from my own experience and from coaching nearly 1,000 men over the years, really learning the patterns. I've worked with men in the community. I've been a mentor for young men voluntarily in my community for a long time. I've been a volunteer mentoring men older than me in the community as well, and I've coached men. I've really just, even when I was in Australia, I was working with men coaching, and I've seen patterns, and I've seen who is more successful in the sense of they are happy and content, and they strive for more in their life, but they're also happy and content with where they are, and they're grateful for where they are, and they take personal responsibility, versus the people who get into that victim mentality and don't see problems as opportunities to grow. They see them as obstacles in the way and use them as an excuse to self-destruct, which I've done many times in the past. It's quite normal. And one thing I want to say before this episode starts is, if you are in this position of being in a victim mentality or emotional suppression, or you feel like you've got a label on you, I don't want you to feel shame for that or guilt, because that's not going to do anything for you. What I want you to do is, I want you to listen to what I have to say, take it in, and try to slowly but surely overcome those problems and develop a different mindset towards problems as well, and things that may have happened to you in your life. And one thing I will say about men when it comes to emotional suppression, victim mentality and labels is, well, more victim mentality and emotional suppression is that men struggle to actually feel feelings. They always try to outwork them or physically distract themselves from the feeling. So I remember in a few workshops this has happened in, I asked the men, what do you do when you're sad? And nearly all of them says, I go to my room and I play FIFA, or I go and work, I go and create something, I go for a run, I go to the gym, and all these things that they do, all of them are distractions. And that may sound harsh, but it's true. And the problem with that is that over time, all you're doing is prolonging the feeling from releasing and being allowed to allowing yourself permission to show that. And the reason why a lot of men do that, I feel like, is number one, they're fearing the reaction that they'll get if they do maybe cry. So I said to the guys, listen, none of you say cry. Why don't you cry when you're sad? And a lot of them looked at me like, fuck, I don't know. And that's scary, like, you know, it is. And I know we see all these things like men cry too and all this shit, but that means nothing, right? That means nothing. They're just words. In our actions as a society, we don't give men the permission to feel that way. We don't allow them the safety to feel that way. And that is why Redefine the Alpha exists. It's a safe space for that to happen. And it has happened many a times. I'm not saying that during the events everyone's crying all the time. It's not like that, but they have permission to feel. And I remember I was with a therapist for a while, and my therapist says to me, what did I tell you to do when someone's taking an epileptic fit? And I said, I don't know, make sure they don't bang their head. And he said, well, yeah, make sure they're safe and they don't bang their head, but don't touch them. And I was like, right. He said, don't touch them because they have to have the fit. They have to have that because they need to release that. That needs to come out. If you restrict them in any way, it does them more harm than damage. And it's the same with your feelings. If you constantly try to control and restrict your feelings, you will do more damage to yourself than good. So sometimes you just need to feel and let it come out. So that is my stance on emotional suppression, is if you don't allow yourself permission to feel and you are not in a safe space where you have permission to feel, it will be suppressed and it will come out worse through self-destructiveness, through more anger, more pain, and a constant drive to distract yourself from that feeling. So that is emotional suppression, and emotional suppression leads also to bad decision making, because what happens is if you're suppressing those feelings, when you're making decisions in your business, in your life, you will be making them from a place of anger, of grief, of sadness, of resentment, of hatred, of this internal struggle that you're fighting, this internal war that you have within yourself. You're making decisions based off of that rather than from a place of peace and of love and of regulation. And that is a lot of the problems with most men, is that they do make decisions from that place as leaders and in their daily life. So emotional suppression is a massive problem for men. They weren't taught any better, you know. Growing up, you weren't told to feel your feelings. I know that when I was growing up, I was told to stop crying multiple times. I was told to stop showing emotions multiple times by, you know, peers in my life, and it's not their fault. And this is where the victim mentality creeps in. So the victim mentality, in my opinion, is a massive, massive problem in the wellness space now, especially with the whole understanding your childhood wounds. So, for example, a lot of people blame their parents for the way they are. Now, while it may be their parents' fault, right, there's a couple of things I have on that. It's a bit of a deeper issue, but your parents, one, didn't know any better. They weren't raised to understand these things either. They only know what they know, and they may have tried their best. Some parents didn't try their best. Some parents actually projected their trauma onto their kids, and that's why you have a lot of people coming out now and saying of toxic parents and actually cutting their parents out of their life, or a parent out of their life. And I agree with that. I think that is 100% okay to do. If it's going to protect your energy, it's going to protect your safety, and you are actually respecting yourself by doing that, and that is okay. Now, there's a couple of things on that. If the parent is genuinely changing their behaviour and apologetic and seeking forgiveness from a place of healing and from a place of overcoming that and understanding that, that may be different. But even at that, it's your own decision. And the victim mentality creeps in when you start to project that behaviour that you have developed from maybe a toxic parent or from maybe toxic people around you in your life. You start to project that on the other people. So an example in my life is when I started off coaching, I was constantly surrounded by PTs and coaches who would talk shit about people constantly, and they would run down people who do things like this, like podcasts, talk about their feelings, talk about mental health, talk about all these things. They would run them down and talk shit about them. And I developed that attitude and started to project it on the other people. So I started to talk shit about other people, about people that I actually ended up becoming really good friends with. I started to resent people who were above me. And the reason why I resented them wasn't because I believed that what they were doing was bullshit. It was because the people I was surrounded by developed that attitude of resentment, and maybe it was because they didn't see, maybe because they seen them doing something that they wanted to do, but they weren't capable of doing it, or they didn't feel safe enough to do it, or they just didn't have the balls to do it themselves. And I started to project that attitude because I wanted to feel safe and I wanted to feel part of something, and I felt like if I did do all this stuff that I'm doing now, I would be outcasted from the tribe, I'd be outcasted from the group, and I would be very lonely, and I couldn't take the rejection, I couldn't take the criticism. Emotionally, it wasn't a place I wanted to be, and that was because of the way I was brought up. It was just, I always wanted to be part of something, I always wanted to fit in, and it was important for me to fit in. Now, I could have easily kept going that way, and then started to understand more about my behaviour and my childhood stuff, and blamed that on why I wasn't where I wanted to be, but I didn't. I used it as a way to understand and reconcile and then take action to change that. And that is the thing. I took power back from the problem. So a lot of people give power to problems or power to situations or circumstances. And when you do that, what good is that going to do? Like, what good is that really going to do to you? Like, all you're doing is giving power to the situation. You can take that back by taking personal responsibility and also having faith. Faith is a massive one. Like, I have complete faith in Redefining the Alpha. I have complete faith in my coaching service. I have faith in what I am doing is giving value to people. Even if it doesn't sell out, even if it doesn't sell loads of programs, I still have massive faith that this is of value to people. Now, that doesn't mean that you ignore constructive criticism or advice from people that you trust and people that you want to reflect or feel safe around. But I have complete conviction and faith in that. And if you had asked me this maybe 3-4 years ago, I would have told you, no, I need to change it. It's not working. And I would have went out of alignment with what I really wanted to do, and I would have just started filling my diary up from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the gym, coaching everybody and everyone, and not feeling happy and not feeling fulfilled because I thought that's what I needed. And that victim mentality would have kicked in, where I would have went, I'm not where I want to be because that guy who's doing what I want to do, he's got money, he's got this behind him, he's got that back. And when really he probably worked his balls off and just did what I was doing, but did it for longer. And I just didn't have faith in what I was doing and fucking packed it in quicker. I thought every problem was an obstacle. I looked at problems as obstacles that stopped me from getting where I wanted to be rather than an opportunity to grow and learn. And that is the difference between you and people who are doing what you want to do in life, is that they don't see problems as an obstacle or a stop sign to say, stop what you're doing right now and turn around and go back to what you were doing before. They see it as an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to learn and move forward. So the victim mentality of blaming people, blaming circumstances, the economy, politicians, Stormont, the government, whatever it is, on a situation that you're in right now, while it may hold some truth, is going to get you fucking nowhere until you take personal responsibility for the stuff that you can control, and you start to have faith and conviction in what you're doing and know deep in your heart that it's going to work, and stick with that. And that's where alignment comes in, and direction. The direction you want your life to go, as I keep saying in every episode, you need to stick with that direction. And all these things like economics, relationships, fallouts, even death, grief, all these things will come in on the way. There'll be like roadblocks on the way, but you have to learn how to sway around them rather than see them as a stop and turn around and go back to where you were, because what good is that going to do? And that is my advice on victim mentality. Victim mentality is a terrible place to be. It causes stress, it causes pain, it prolongs you from reaching what you want to reach in life. It prolongs that journey. And another thing as well is, if you think that you're going to use the victim mentality and turn back and you're not going to have problems, you're going to have more problems, because the way back is more painful than the way forward. And that is from experience. When you go backwards, it is so much more painful than going forwards. Even if going forwards is full of challenges, unknown things in the way, the fear of not knowing what's going to happen, it is far less painful than going back to doing what you were doing before and feeling like you're stuck and that you can't move and you can't progress forward. So get rid of that victim mentality. It's nobody's fault. It's not about blaming people. It's about understanding why you are the way you are so that you can move forward. And then when things happen along the way and you get those triggers where you go, fuck, I may turn back, or fuck, this isn't working, you can take yourself back there. You can use the regulation tools and the grounding tools to bring you back down to earth, regulate you, and then you can start to go, right, I remember way back then I felt this way and I turned back and it didn't work out for me. So now I'm going to do it different, and I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, stay convicted. It's that simple. So victim mentality, scrap it, get rid of it. The other thing is labels. So I'll quickly touch on this. Now, most men are labelled long before they were understood. So nowadays we know what labels are, but this has been happening for many, many years. From no age you are labelled as, you know, beautiful or ugly. You're labelled as smart or stupid. You're labelled as a hater or a good child. You're labelled as a rocket. You're labelled as someone who's smart. You're labelled as all these different things. You know, you're given labels from you're a child, literally. And then when you go on into school, secondary school, this is one thing I hate, is you're labelled in tribes. So you've got, you know, smart people, the cool people, the nerds, the whatever. You've got all those different wee groups. So there's a hierarchy in the school, right? So it's like schoolyard politics. You've got all these different labels, right? But nowadays, it's like there's so many labels, you know, and this is the problem, is when you give a child, when you give someone who is in that stage of their life where they're developing and they're only starting to really understand themselves a wee bit, a label, they will either, one, live up to that label, or two, live the rest of their life trying to prove you wrong for labeling them that way, in a toxic way. So they've got the one that sort of lives up to the label, so you call them, this is why I hate the term toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity is a label, and if you give that label to a teenager, they will, one, either live up to it, or two, spend the rest of their life in fear of being called that again, and constantly live insecure, low confidence, quiet. They won't approach anyone, they won't go for job interviews, they live in anxiety, they'll live in fear of their own masculinity. And masculinity is an important thing to have in the world right now. It's important to have masculinity. Masculine traits are very important. It's just about striking a balance of having, you know, the feminine energy and the masculine energy. But if you're going to label a teenager as toxic masculinity, or whatever you want to call it, you are therefore telling them that their masculinity is toxic and they can't tap into those things. They can't be confrontational, they can't stand up for themselves, they can't be confident, they can't go forward, and they can't take action. Then you are literally putting them into a shell. Or you've got the other side of it, which is the people who spend the rest of their life trying to prove you wrong by using their masculine to drive forward and to be relentless in their work, relentless in what they do on a day-to-day basis, relentless in the content they put out, etc., and relentless in their message. And they may live up to that expectation of toxic masculinity because they develop a bad relationship with women, they develop a bad relationship with their own masculinity in the opposite way of showing up. They explode it and they never tap into their feminine. They're emotionally suppressed. They are constantly leaking that out with anger, constantly leaking that out with misogyny, or whatever you want to call it, violence, all these things. And yet we live in a society where labels are normal, and we're surprised that this is happening. We're surprised that we've got this red pill sort of generation of, you know, women hating kind of men who constantly project egotistic sort of dominant assertiveness, and yet we label them from their teenager that their toxic masculinity is, they have toxic masculinity, and we're surprised by this. So what should we do with labels? In my opinion, get rid of them, or at least explain why you're labeling them that way, and understand as well that if you label them, if you label teenagers, you label kids, or you even label people in general with stupid, smart, whatever, that they will either live up to it and be that way and spend their life being that way, or they will go the opposite end and they will constantly spend the rest of their life trying to prove you wrong. And neither of them are good, because both of them lead to emotional suppression, burnout, low confidence. You know, it's And labels, in my opinion, are a very dangerous thing. I remember in school we were labelled as soon as you went into school. You took a test, and the school I went to, they basically the test would give you your intelligence level, and you were put into a class based on your intelligence level. Now imagine the difference in the attitude and behaviours of a teenager in the lower end of the intelligence, just from a test, the lower end of the intelligence level to the top end. Imagine the difference. And do you really think that that is going to help the guys who, and the girls as well, who are in that lower bracket? Do you think it's going to help them by actually labelling them and identifying them as someone who is in that lower bracket? It's insane. But that is the schools, that's the education system, and that's a whole different conversation. But labels, as I say, those are the two things that come out of labels. Live up to it, spend the rest of your life trying to prove them wrong. So folks, I really hope it's got some value from that. We are going to try to release an episode every week. We're going to touch on different topics. If you want me to talk about any topics that you feel need to be talked about, you feel like it's not touched on enough, or you want me to even touch on a subject that I maybe mentioned in there or in a previous episode, then let me know in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe. See you next time.